Okay. Hi, can everybody hear me? Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I am thrilled and honored, and it's such a blessing. I apologize beforehand for those more knowledgeable than me in the room. If there's like, what is she saying? Okay, but I am very excited though. I love art. I love everything that has to do with early women in Christianity when it comes to art. And my hope is just continue studying and learning. And it's just such a wonderful gift to share a little bit of what I've learned so far. So thank you. As we have been learning about believing her story and just being knowledgeable about these women that have shaped the course of our faith, it is unregrettable, or like we cannot stop to at some point find ourselves with a lot of painters, a lot of sculptures, a lot of artists that years, like hundreds of years after these women were alive, would have portrayed them in certain specific ways. And I would like to share specifically today about one of them, and it's an artist named Giotto di Bondone, who has done incredible artwork, did a lot of artworks that are pertinent to things that we see depicted when it comes to churches, when it comes to frescoes. A lot of figures that he did in his artwork, it reflected a certain characteristics of how he will portray the Virgin Mary, Mary of Magdalene, and other women that were along with Christ. So I would like to just share a little bit of his perspective in some of these late medieval images. And I want to start first by laying a little bit of a framework when it comes to the church and the arts. And I put here this title of Art in Churches, the Church Building as an Image of the Cosmos. Specifically when we are talking about past the year 380 or so, churches now are looking very different, right? Like no longer, yes, there is still some level of danger if you are a Christian to a certain extent, but it's not that necessarily the church has to meet in the house of someone to not be seen or going to a catacomb. Now there are these buildings, specifically buildings that first they may have been used as a pagan temple or as for a pagan deity. If you go specifically to Rome, you will see many church buildings today that before used to be dedicated to God or goddess. And it's very interesting because then you will see some buildings in Rome specifically as well, or certain parts of Italy that were building after, for instance, Egyptian temples. So it's kind of like a little bit of that ladder of who started to do what, who followed then. So it's very fascinating when you are there and you get to see this experience, or this building, sorry. But something that it is a fact is that these churches in once Christianity was the religion of the empire, they were not just like, oh, let's just get a room and get some Christians. It was really a place that mattered. It was this little piece of heaven on earth. And that's why I put here the church building as an image of cosmos. So the five senses were very important. You were seeing things, you were touching things, you were smelling, listening to things, tasting things. So even though today we may see spaces like this, which is, by the way, a chapel that Giotto painted that we're gonna dive into more later. Today we may go to places like this and just say, wow, look at this beautiful art, and kind of immediately think as if I am relating to an art gallery or a museum. But back in the day, this was like, duh, that's the church. I mean, we are going to see places of beauty and worship, and all this art around us is necessary because it's leading us to why we are here. So we come with concepts like thin space, which is the first time I heard it was through Dr. Glan in one of these medieval art classes. This like sacred spaces where there is a very fine line between earth and heaven. The material is important. So it's not that it is invalid if, for example, today we will go to someone's house and have popcorn and read our Bibles, great. But the material aspect in early Christianity matters. And to me, it's always fascinating, for instance, going to the catacombs and despite of anything, just seeing those like images on the wall, I'm like, someone thought that it was important to draw in a place like this. I mean, somebody thought that those sarcophagi needed to have these incredible sculptures around it. And going way back, God thought it was important that even in the desert, this tabernacle had to be beautiful. And if not, he wouldn't have gone through details of how to make it look like. So material is important, it matters. And I wanted to share also a little bit of ways that they would have, or they started to do this like division in churches, which still we see a lot of it today. So for instance, a very easy way to divide these spaces will be in three parts. The narthex, and I don't know if you can see my click, or my pointer, but this would have been, or this is the entrance of a church. That narthex area represented the earth. Then you would go to the nave, which is like a representation of heaven. And in these heaven spaces, you would have a lot of images portraying different saints, men and women that had been part of the church at some point. It would also have biblical scenes, different things that just will kind of make you feel or have this feeling that you are in a sacred space. And then we go to even a more holy place physically, that is the sanctuary. In this part that says solea, typically you would have something called iconostasis, that it's a wall of icons where divided the nave between, the space, between the nave and the sanctuary. So then all of these churches will be facing east. And a lot of things is related to east. For now, east is where, towards Jerusalem, where everything started, right, or Israel. So still today, many churches, specifically in the Orthodox tradition, the Catholic tradition as well, Roman Catholic, you will see these churches that are facing east. So for instance, in Chicago, I love it because every Orthodox church in Chicago is pointing to the lake, and you know that is east. If nothing else, you're like, oh, Orthodox church, east, okay. So that's a great way to not lose yourself in the city, just, on the side. Then as like centuries started to continue going, and now we are like in this Romanesque or Gothic period, then we have larger churches that still maintain a similar structure, but now they are just more extended. So not only now they have a narthex or a nave, now they have aisles, and some of them, like if you go to the Basilica of Francis of Assisi in Assisi, Italy, it's huge, and from the nave you have different chapels to the sides. And then now also, not only what is inside matters, but what is outside matters, to the point that sometimes in the Gothic or Romanesque periods, you will see these churches that are beautiful on the outside, but then you go inside and now they have changed. It's not the same as it was before. Not that it is less value, it's just like things change as time continue going. So I am sharing all this because it is important just to understand the context of where these artists will have created these images for. And I would say most of the art that we see on the Visual Museum gallery, it's coming from contexts like this. So if today you go, for example, to the Art Institute of Chicago, on the second floor they have a medieval art space that it's easy to miss if you are not observant, but they try to give it a little bit of a feeling of a chapel. The ceiling is vaulted, and they put stuff in there that was taken away from altar pieces or churches. So many of our objects of art that we see today in galleries of museums, it's hard to imagine that one day they were part of a church like this, but they were. So they were served for a specific purpose. Many of the art we see today, it may not even be dated or may be like signed by an author, because it was just part of like the many things people did of creating art or making art for churches. It wasn't necessarily or immediately for look at how amazing or skilled I am as an artist. Yes, some artists stand out more than others, but I just want to say like this is something that was just very common to do, specifically in the beginning of the Middle Ages, like the 5th century on, prior to the Renaissance. Like this is just something so many people did. Okay, so moving on, I want to share a little bit context of Giotto di Bondone. So something that I want to say, a disclaimer, is that most of what we know about this particular artist is thanks to an art historian called Giorgio Vasari, who wrote a book called The Greatest Life of the Artist. And he wrote this in 1550. So almost 200 or more years than Giotto lived. He's considered one of the first art historians in the Western world. So he put whatever he wanted to put. So who knows, actually, if this story is right or not, but he wrote that. And specifically about Giotto, what he wrote is that one day he was a shepherd. He was tending to his father's sheep and was sketching. And then suddenly one of the masters of Florentine paints in the day, Cimabue, saw him painting or sketching and said, wow, you're very talented. Come and work with me in my workshop. And so he did, and then it came a point where Giotto grew more than Cimabue and became more skilled than his own teacher. So that is a common story that it is, or Giorgio Vasari told. Giotto, it is considered the first of the great Italian painters. There are many wonderful Italian painters, more men than women, sadly, but not sadly as in, I mean, great, but it will be awesome if we had more women painters, of course. But Giotto was the first, then Masaccio in the 1400s came, and then Leonardo da Vinci, which, by the way, he was the one who named Giotto as the painter superior to all masters of centuries past. So guys like Masaccio, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, they will have gone to places like these chapels that Giotto did and use that as a reference. So it was almost like Giotto was their Google, basically. Some of the things that he did was a chapel, or in a city called Padova, or in a chapel, which we'll talk in a moment, a series of altar pieces or polyptychs, which is something like this, just basically pieces, large pieces of wood that will tell the stories of saints. And then I put this picture here because Giotto is the first one who put, it's a fun fact, not related maybe to the subject, but Giotto is the one who first painted a kiss in the history of art. Before him, no one did it. So he did it over there. I'm going to talk a little more later also about why he was such a... I am very sorry. I have lived in the States 10 years, and sometimes there are words that I don't know how to say in English or I forget. We have a Spanish word called parteaguas, which is like you have this event that divides or splits. And I forgot the English word. I should have looked it up. But he was just this person who kind of marked before and after. Okay, I want to talk about specifically the Madonna and Child theme. Very important because Giotto was one of the many artists who did artwork or altar pieces based on the Madonna and Child. And a little bit of context on this. This is something, or this particular form of art or icon came after the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, where, among many other things, Mary was declared as the Theotokos, which is the mother of God in relation to Christ, affirming Christ's deity. And after that, then you start to see icons, particularly, not that there wouldn't be icons of a Madonna or even Madonna and Child. I mean, as a matter of fact, there is one much earlier in the catacombs of Priscilla, but specifically a Madonna and Child enthroned with Christ on the lap, angels or other saints around it. It started to happen after this council. There is this term called hodegetria, which means she who shows the way. Sometimes it could be very specific, as in you will see Mary doing this and then Christ will be here. Sometimes subtle, but she is pointing the way to salvation. And this particular iconography, Byzantine iconography over here, influenced 13th and 14th century fresco painting, which is around the time that Giotto and his contemporaries were. And I tried to look for these two are Giotto's Madonnas. Specifically, this Madonna I will talk about. I tried to find some sort of icons that were maybe similar so we can see similarities, differences. I want to talk specifically about this over here. So this is the Madonna Ognissanti, which means Madonna, My Lady, or Mary, and all the saints, which he painted in the 1300s. This is an icon, a Byzantine icon of the same Madonna Ognissanti, though it's from Greece and it's much older than this one. But if we look at it, we can see many similarities here. So for instance, we see two angels here. We see the angels there. Both of these Madonnas are enthroned. Usually in Byzantine icons, it's not uncommon to see the main figure, which in this case would be the Madonna, and then surrounded by different prophets from the Old Testament, or fathers of the church, or important women like Catherine of Alexandria around it. So he did a similar thing, except that he kind of put them in the background. I'm sorry about this. So we can see some of the similarities in terms of the theme, but if you can see immediate differences, it would be that Byzantine iconography, these images look almost as if they were floating, right, in this space. Like we can see them and immediately assume or say that this is a divine image, a sacred image, but there's not really, they don't necessarily look like somebody I can think of. And icons meant to be sort of like a portrait, not necessarily an accurate representation of a person. But what Giotto did is that he still included in his work elements from this Byzantine iconography, like the gold background, certain colors, but he did some humanizing there. Like he inserted human attributes to holy images that were used before then as for worship purposes. Something that is also very important to know is that Byzantine iconography, something like this, it would have made or be done for veneration purposes. Veneration means that you would approach an icon or an image like this. You will do the sign of the cross, do a little reverence, kiss the icon, do another sign of the cross. This is a typical veneration practice that you would see in Byzantine. Now, when we have this no longer was used for veneration, but then these were put in, typically this was part of an altar piece, so it would have been at the altar in the back kind of more like for witnessing purposes as opposed as veneration. So for us today, it's just, oh, okay, I can see. But back in the day, this was very radical. Because one, at this point, the church, East and West, has already separated and gone different ways. But still, people are trying to get themselves to that idea. And things are changing, you know. So this is some of the things that Giotto did that were very important and changed so much of Western art after him. I want to show you something very fun. So if you go today to Uffizi, the gallery there in Florence, where they have that Madonna Ognissanti, which is huge, they have it in a room where it's only that one in the middle, and then two similar ones to the sides. And they are, again, very large. And then there are a few other small pieces, but they really want you to take in on what this is. So, for example, same theme, Madonna and all the saints. This was made by Duccio, which was one of Giotto's contemporaries in 1280s. This is from 13 to 1305. And then this was made by Cimabue, Giotto's teacher, also like in 1270. So they are not too far from each other. And as a matter of fact, Giotto, according to Vasari, saw this too before he created his. So if we can tell some of the immediate differences, we could see kind of what I was saying earlier. These are looking very flat, sort of not really, yes, real, but they are floating. And then here we see Giotto using more of an actual space. We see the Madonna occupying a space with her body. I want to show you guys just last one on this, another more definition of the Ognissanti. So I mentioned earlier how Byzantine iconography would have been made for specific purposes of veneration. This has the purpose of being there at the altar, but still, though, something that I love about Giotto is that he would be very specific of what you wanted. He wanted you to see. So the way that the size of this and how it is positioned is that your eye level, if you were to see it in front of you, eye level will be around here, which is the hand of Christ doing a blessing. And it's not that he wanted just to see the hand, but he, as I said, still he's taking these elements from Byzantine art. And in Byzantine art, the way they specifically will do icons is that where the hand is parallel to where the heart is. And from the heart, everything comes. So this is like very important, this part of the body. And the way your eye is, and if you see it in person, your eye level is right there to the heart. Something also that he did specifically is he put, yes, all of the saints and prophets, as you would have seen in Byzantine, but now they are more like witnessing this moment or witnessing this figure. The Madonna and Christ are significantly larger than everybody else, and that is with an intention. So we see all these things, and it's, yes, it is part of and a fascinating aspect about art history in general, but it is still something that it's not only about how talented or skilled you are, but it's about what you want the viewer to see, what you want to communicate about who do you believe Jesus is, who do you believe the Madonna or Mary is, if that makes sense. So I just love his specific attention to detail. Of course, we have like the colors. Blue typically reflect heaven. The white is for purity. Red, it's also martyrdom or blood. So typically if we see humanity as well, so it's very common to see images of Christ with red or red and blue. Also, it's common to see images of Mary using those colors as well. We have the gold that represents divinity. holiness, light, very important. Colors mean a lot when it comes to early Christian art. As a matter of fact, in Byzantine periods, you wouldn't have black in your icons. You may have a navy blue, and I think icons like the Nativity of Christ, you see some black in the cave, but that's pretty much it. Because that is, we are trying to use colors here that represent what we believe these people and these scenes were, if that makes sense. So that is on the Madonna. And I want to just go to my last part of this and talk about this particular place, which is the Scrovegni Chapel. As I said, because in the 1300s, late 1200s, when Giotto was alive, people like Giorgio Vasari were not existent in that same way. Like Giorgio Vasari was alive when many of these Renaissance artists were happening, so it was easier to keep track. So there are a good amount of like artworks by Giotto that we are not really sure if he did them or not. But this is one that many art historians agree, yes, it was made by him. And very quick, the story or the backstory of this is that there was a very rich man, Enrico Scrovegni, who had a palace house there in the city of Padova. He was sort of like a tax collector for his job, and he would also collect interest like a banker. And even though it is very common for us to go to a bank, open an account, and yes, it's gonna generate interest, back in the day to do that is like you're stealing. And then the story is that Dante Alighieri put him in his hell in the Divine Comedy, and then he's like, oh no, what am I gonna do like to get out of there? So his family were like, hey, let's commission a chapel. So, you know, that would be a good deed to do. So that's what he did. He had this chapel space and commissioned Giotto to paint the whole space with frescoes. I love this place because sometimes you see details and you're like, oh boy, how did they put the marble there? And it's like, no, there's no marble. All is painted. I know it's not the purpose, but I just love, it's fascinating how the way they will do these frescoes. And the reason why, like hundreds of years after this was painted, I mean, over 700 years later, we have still those colors, is because the way he will do it is when the fresco was still wet, he will put in the pigment, so then the pigment paint will become one with the wall. And that is why these places have been preserved. On a fun little note, I love it that you can be there and tell the people that work there, I have come as far as Chicago to see here, or I have come as far as Australia, and they will be like, cool, you only have 15 minutes here. So they will make you watch a video for 15 minutes and then let you in for 15 minutes, and then there goes an alarm, and you have to go out, and that was it. So that's how they been managed to preserve it. This is a UNESCO World Site, so I can see that. The way this is organized is that there are 13 frescoes at the top around it of the life of the Virgin Mary. There are 29 frescoes of the life of Christ in the second level. And then this part are frescoes specifically on the Passion of Christ. There is a whole wall dedicated to the Last Judgment. And then we cannot see it, but the wall in front would be, it's a wall that he did as a mausoleum for him and his family. So that is what we usually, how it is portrayed there. And I want to draw our attention to some particular images there about women and how he portrayed them. And even though there are so many of women there, because again, life of Mary, her life, her mother, and life of Christ, and in all of these panels, he portrays very specific details about the biblical account. But I love this one in particular because one, you see Mary over here holding, the way she's holding her son. I love it that he did a parallel from the Nativity. This is in the same fresco, I'm sorry, in the same artwork. But he portrayed or mimicked the same posture for both the nativity and when she is holding her son as he is dead. The emotions on the faces, very individualistic in the sense that each woman is having a very unique sentiment or feeling about what is going on. Little details like this, for instance, this wouldn't have happened before Giotto's time. These two images here are just serving the purpose for you to focus on the middle like plano here, that is Mary and Christ. These are just like framing it. That is a technique or a style that was not proper of that time. So Mary Magdalene here with at Jesus' feet. So just the way he would, again, just show this emotion of what they were experimenting in the moment. I love how he would, in between these two, there is a little column like this. In these columns, he put, for example, a picture of Jonah and the whale, which is an image, as we know, of like Christ in the tomb. So, but I love just how he continued the story. This mountain here continues going there. Little details like over here. It's very hard to see. This is a little higher, but a dead tree with some signs of a spring. All of it full of different symbolisms that are pointing you to the story. And then, of course, non mi toccare, or don't touch me, image of Mary Magdalene and Christ. So he truly, or as much as it was possible, he tried to be faithful to either the biblical account of the story or the traditional legends of the story. Which is something that it really transmitted into the viewers about what he was trying to portray or convey. And I just want to end with another set that it is not 100% attributed to him. Some people think it's possible that it might have been some of his apprentices. These are like the Mary Magdalene frescoes in Assisi Lower Basilica. This is from 1320s. A lot of people would say it's him because of images like this one, particular, the non mi toccare, don't touch me, is similar to the one he did in Padova. But what is very interesting about these frescoes is that this is what happened with that character of Mary of Magdalene. It is this combination of Mary of Bethany and Mary of Egypt. And it was so interesting when I was looking at the names of all the individual panels, because they will put names specifically about the priest that supposedly Mary of Magdalene had an encounter with. And a couple days ago at my church, we had a liturgy focus for Mary of Egypt that was a couple hours. And I heard those names in relation to Mary of Egypt, not of Mary of Magdalene. So this is just something that unfortunately has happened in Western art, where these combinations of characters were sort of like shaken to one. But the sentiment, I feel that specifically going back to these images of Giotto in his frescoes, or the image of the Ognissanti Madonna that I share, I think that are very in line to what we see or what we can imagine that these characters, this women, were going through in those circumstances at the time. And I just want to finish this by reading an account of an Eastern view of Mary of Magdalene that I feel that really reflects what we see in these paintings, and also what I see that the Visual Museum is doing. So I will read some of it. July 22nd is no ordinary day in the church. It is holy because it belongs to an extraordinary woman. For over 1,000 years, the name of St. Mary Magdalene has marked this day in the ancient calendar of our church. Around the world, Christians in many lands celebrate this woman who stood with Christ at the cross and beyond. The Gospels record that she was a remarkable woman. Mary of Magdala claimed dignity and independence for herself at a time when women counted for little or nothing. Defying restrictive laws and customs, she walked with Jesus all the way from Galilee to Jerusalem. In town and countryside, this fearless, loyal woman disciple shared his healing ministry of love and reconciliation. She stood with Jesus in the struggle against hatred and violence, against sexist, racist, and religious prejudices. The struggle was never easy. It was often dangerous. And one day, Jesus died on the cross. Thinking that the end had come, the male disciples ran and hid. Already one had betrayed, and another had denied him 3 times. But Mary Magdalene, with other women disciples, remained in Jerusalem, watching, waiting, and weeping. 3 days later, joy replaced sorrow and tears when Mary of Magdala experienced the resurrection. She was the first to see and speak with the risen Lord. On that first Easter morning, God exalted this woman above all the disciples. God commanded her to go and tell what she had witnessed, empowering her to become the apostle to the apostles. From a woman's lips first came the good news of love's triumph over evil and death, the good news of life and liberation for all of God's children. Christianity's first apostle, a leader in the primitive Christian church, a pioneer in the struggle to build a new earth, St. Mary Magdalene wears the brightest of halos. Let us honor the memory of our fourth sister by pledging ourselves to stand fast, securing justice for the weak and proclaiming liberty to captives, setting the downtrodden free and binding up hearts that are broken. So thank you for your time, and my hope with any of this that, thank you. Thank you. And just last thought, my hope is that everything that we learn about early women in Christianity, whether it's through art or through literature or through lectures, that somehow it finds a connection to here to here, so that they are not only living theologically and academically in our minds, but they can somehow find a way to our hearts and point us to Christ even more. So thank you very much.